Hey folks, Eddie from Totally Wired Guitars here, and I'm super excited because today we are going to be doing our deep dive review of the new Fender Vintera III early 60s Bass 6. In addition to going over this new Bass 6's specs, I'm also going to be covering my initial impressions and observations, and then we're going to throw it on the bench and see what we need to do to get this thing playing the best it possibly can. Now, before we do anything else, I need to thank our kind friends over at Sounds for sending this and all of the Vintera III models to me on loan for review. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, this new Vintera III Bass 6 was the first of the 4 offset models that I covered in my recent first impressions of the entire offset Vintera III lineup. And I've got to say, this thing is just gorgeous. Let's go ahead and go over these specs. So the Vintera III Bass 6 has an alder body and came in 3 finishes. That is the candy apple red with the matching headstock. It also came in Olympic white as well as a 3-tone sunburst. This also features a maple neck with a round laminate rosewood fretboard, 30-inch scale length, as well as a 1.65-inch or 42mm nut width. Now, unlike the Vintera II Bass 6, this one actually comes with a bone nut, which is really, really nice. As you can see, this model also features clay dots. That's what's in the spec sheet. And I can't tell from here whether these are actual clay dots, as in, is it that tinted clay all the way through, or is it actually vintage accurate? Because if you've ever had to do a re-radiusing or planing of a vintage fretboard, you will know that once you start to rub away at the top layer of those vintage guitars, that these sepia colored or tan colored clay dots are actually white underneath. And I did notice that on the Vintera II Road Worn Jazzmaster. I wasn't sure if they had just kind of dyed the top of normal white plastic dots, but I don't think Fender would lie on the spec sheets, and I do trust that these are actual clay dots. Now, like the rest of the Vintera III series, the finish on this is a gloss polyurethane finish on both the body and neck. And I did want to show you, like I showed in my initial review, that these seem to have potentially the Fender Pure Vintage tuners. They have the single line text there, Fender branded, but this definitely is a nod to the late 50s, early 60s Kluson vintage style tuners. This neck also features a 7¼ inch radius with vintage tall frets, and I can feel here that they definitely did some rolling of the fretboard edges because it feels nice and rounded over and kind of worn in feeling, which makes it super comfortable in hand. Moving on to the hardware, the big selling point and differentiator against the Vintera II Bass 6 is the fact that this time around they included the very rare and coveted Bass 6 mute. Now, if you are like many that have gone on the hunt to try to source an aftermarket Fender mute for the Bass 6, this much wider spec to accommodate that much bigger bridge as compared to that that's featured on the Jaguar, you'll know that that has been a super impossible task, and that you are either going to have to buy a vintage Bass 6 that already has that installed, or a custom shop model that you specifically had requested that feature be included. If you saw that first impressions video, you'll know that unfortunately, when we engage this foam that's installed here, that's intended to mute all the strings, doesn't actually touch the strings in this case. And so that is definitely something that we are going to have to do once this hits the bench and we set this up. In addition to that, Fender did bring back from the Vintera II series the vintage accurate bridge that features the steel threaded saddles here. It does have the wider channel, which is correct for the Bass 6, and that's why they did have to produce the larger Bass 6 specific mute for this model. And lastly, on the hardware front, Fender did bring back the same tremolo unit from the Vintera II series. This is the pop-in arm, mostly vintage accurate unit, and it is high quality and not one that I would be looking to swap out with an American vintage reissue unit, because I would say that this is 85% to 90% as good as that one. And especially on a Bass 6, I feel like it's not going to make that much of a noticeable difference. And so don't waste your money by trying to upgrade on that front, in my personal opinion. Moving on to the electronics, and new for the entire Vintera III lineup is the introduction of period accurate colored cloth covered wiring harnesses. I've never seen that on any mid-tier Fender over the past 20 or so years. And they did bring back the same premium quality CTS pots, as well as Switchcraft switches and input jack that are featured not only on their Vintera series since their launch, but it's the same electronics that they feature even on their higher end American Vintage series. In addition to that, Fender finally listened and brought back the conductive shielding paint to the pickup and control cavities here. It was a strange omission from the Vintera II series that most folks were not happy with, especially since the Bass 6 comes with 3 single coil pickups. So I'm going to be curious to see how that looks once we actually crack this thing open. And lastly, Fender supposedly changed the pickups in this to be period accurate early 60s pickups. There's nothing in the documentation that tells us what kind of magnets are being used here, but if it's early 60s, I would imagine that these are probably Alnico 2 rather than the Alnico 5 magnets that were used on the Vintera II series. If they are Alnico 2s, I would expect them to be slightly warmer, maybe even slightly hotter in output than the Vintera II pickups, giving an overall woodier, kind of more vintagey sounding tone to them. So I am excited to hear these in depth when we go through our sound demos. And lastly, Fender definitely leaned into the vintage accurate details by putting the decal over the finish this time around. The one gripe that some folks had was the fact that the offset contour body decal here is more of a square kind of cutout, which is definitely not vintage accurate and a strange decision. And I think it's because they are actually using lesser quality decals than are featured on their American Vintage and custom shop models. And that would explain why the die cut is different on that offset contour body. A minor gripe, and one that can easily be addressed. You can get out some Goo Gone or even some naphtha to gently scrape that away and replace it if you care that much. But for me, if I owned one of these, I would just leave it as is. And one last period accurate detail that they decided to do on this early 60s Vintera III Bass 6 is the wider spacing of the 12th fret dots here. It's very evident once you compare it to the narrower spacing on the Vintera II model. Now, my first impressions of this out of the box started off with acknowledging just how beautiful of a Bass 6 this is. It is a pristine and flawless finish overall throughout, and seems to be a slightly thinner gloss polyurethane finish than the previous Vintera II and Vintera I models, which makes it feel a bit closer to the finishes on their American Vintage line, despite the fact that it's not nitro. I do think it's a shame that they didn't also do the matching headstock on the Olympic White Bass 6, especially because they do have a 3-tone sunburst model in the lineup that already appeases the anti-matching headstock camp. Since we're throwing this on the bench, we are going to get into the thick of it with the fit and finish, but first impressions are that this is really, really good. I was expecting, based on previous experiences, that there would be fret sprout here, but none of that is evident, thankfully. I'm not getting any buzzing on the open strings when I play them, so that means that none of the nut slots here are cut a bit too deep. One of the things, and I don't know what amount of relief they set this up with from the factory, I'm imagining that it is shifted since these were first shipped out due to environmental changes. but there is an excessive amount of relief currently on the fretboard, which is contributing to the higher feeling action, at least higher than I personally would like. And so we are going to check, and I'm going to report to you what those numbers are across the board before we actually take this apart and set it up properly. The other unfortunate thing that I discovered during the unboxing of this was that for whatever reason, the vibrato arm or tremolo arm, as well as the Allen keys for adjusting the bridge were missing. I hope that that is a rare occurrence, and hopefully it only happened to me, and that all of you who bought this or are going to buy this receive your tremolo arms. But again, that is something that can easily be sorted out either by Fender or the dealer that you bought this from, because that definitely would be a bummer. For today's demo, I have put in place here just another Vintera II Bass 6 arm that I had in the shop. Now, as it's set up from the factory, it's perfectly playable with the 24 to 100 gauge strings. These are definitely thick enough to fulfill bass duties. If you plug this in to an actual bass amp, you definitely get a lot of low end on tap here, but also they are not so thick that you can't plug this in potentially and do some more baritone-like stuff through a guitar amp. And I would definitely recommend that you do not plug this in and turn up your amp all the way if you have an amp like my Princeton Reverb Reissue, especially if you do not have a lot of headroom in that speaker. And I definitely would tell you to throw caution to the wind in engaging any kind of heavy fuzzes, because the likelihood of you blowing a speaker increases exponentially if you do that. The action here, as I mentioned just before, is definitely a bit higher than I personally would like. And so that is something that we're going to have to address, in addition to the fact that the mute currently does not work. So we're going to go ahead and throw this thing on the bench and do all the fun, nerdy stuff that we love to do on this channel. I'm going to share for you the figures or numbers as related to the way that it's currently set up stock from the factory. That includes the relief, the action, the nut slot depth here, and then we are going to do all of the nerdy stuff and crack this thing open, verify whether or not the tuners here are actually the Fender Pure Vintage tuners, and then we're gonna just set this up to play the best it possibly can before we plug it in and give you some sound demos. All right, so the first things that I want to share with you all is just the height of the bridge, as well as the height of the strings in relation to the top of the 12th fret. So as far as our bridge goes, right now we've got about 5.5 millimeters from the base of the bridge to the pick guard. At the 12th fret here, we have got about 4 millimeters, which is really high, twice the height of what is traditionally considered low action. And at the high E here, we've got roughly about 3.25 millimeters. Moving on to our nut slot depth, I'm using my StewMac nut slot depth gauge here. I am getting about 31 thousandths on the low E, also 31 thousandths on the A, about 28 thousandths on the D, 33 thousandths on the G, 33 thousandths on the B, and 32 thousandths on the high E. So overall, I would say that the nut slots here were cut fairly conservatively, and I definitely like to give a bit more space than I traditionally would on a guitar, for example. I would probably cut these to about 25 thousandths or so on the low strings, and probably about 20 thousandths or so on the treble strings here, especially because you do not know whether or not you've got a lot of high frets on this thing. And if you go too low, you're going to end up with buzzing on your open strings, which is definitely not something that you want. So it's nice to see that they slotted this bow nut conservatively rather than going a bit too much, which definitely would result in you having to replace that nut, or at least doing the super glue and bone nut dust filling that nobody wants to do on a brand new guitar. Now, we're going to go ahead and check how much relief is on this from the factory by putting a capo at the first fret here and depressing the last fret, and checking with our handy dandy Fret Guru XT here, the mother of all guitar gauges. I am going to be measuring from the top of the 8th fret to the bottom of the low and high E strings to find the relief. So yeah, we have got quite a bit of relief here. We've got 60 thousandths at the low E, and we've got roughly 40 thousandths at the high E as it's currently set up. And so yeah, that definitely is way more relief than what I want. Fender usually recommends about 10 thousandths, maybe a little bit more for a bass so that you're not buzzing, especially with these thicker strings. We're definitely going to have to address that during the setup. And before we actually crack this thing open, let's go ahead and verify whether or not these tuners here are actually the Fender Pure Vintage tuners, aka the Goto SD91s that have been rebranded by Fender. And I really am hoping that it is what I think it is, because that definitely would add to the overall value of this guitar, especially being that this one, the Bass 6, is the most expensive of all the Vintera III offset guitar models. So what we're looking for is a little Japan stamp in the inner casing of this tuner. And unfortunately, no, we have a PW. You're not going to be able to see this. So these are just clones made by Ping. These are essentially the same tuners that came on the Vintera II as well as the Vintera I models. It's basically the same tuner that they use on all of their non-American vintage and custom shop models if they are going with vintage style tuners. But it is, I still give it to them that it's nice. They did give us the aesthetic details of that single line, and it's a nice differentiator. But yeah, a bit disappointing that it is not the pure vintage tuner. And again, I've never had any issue with the tuners on the Vintera models. So Ping in Taiwan overall does a decent job, and they have definitely improved with regard to their quality over the years. So yeah, it's nice that they didn't go in the opposite direction and put some no-name, economy tuners on this thing, especially seeing that it's $1,500. Another observation that I'm making here is definitely the string spacing from the factory is definitely not ideal. That may have happened during my demos because the saddles might have sank. That is definitely a complaint that I've heard some people saying that they have noticed on the models that have been shipped to them, that we're still dealing with the tolerances on the little height adjustment screws for these saddles, as well as the bridge height adjustment screws not being super tight tolerances, and therefore resulting in either the saddles and or the bridge itself sinking over time. And so if you were to buy one of these, I highly recommend that you Loctite or use some thread locker. I use the Loctite Purple 222 because it is a low strength, but it does a good enough of a job with regards to keeping the saddles and bridge from sinking, while also helping you avoid an issue that I have dealt with on a lot of clients' guitars who kind of went ham with the Loctite Blue 242, where they end up being so tight in there that you either need to use a soldering iron to melt how much Loctite that they've put in to be able to actually adjust the screws. And if you don't do that, there is a high risk of stripping those little screws, which would definitely suck. So yeah, don't do that. All right, it is time for us to go ahead and go under the hood here and just check to see if indeed the Bass 6 has shielded cavities. So on the Mustang, it was unfortunately reported and discovered that there was no shielding on the Mustang. I'm expecting that on here, because this is the more expensive model, that this has shielding. And oh my God. So the Bass 6 does not have shielding. Not in that control cavity, at least. Let's go ahead and look inside of this control panel. See if there's any shielding in there. And no shielding in that cavity either. So bare wood, my friends. And we do see the cloth covered wiring, which is nice to see. But I do not know why they decided to omit that and then include it on the Jaguar and the Jazzmaster. Maybe when we lift the guard, we're going to see some shielding underneath the pickup cavities. Who knows? I know that they've done weird stuff like that before. Like on the I believe the Player II Mustang that I checked out had that where there was not any shielding in the control cavities, but there was shielding underneath the pickup. So at very minimum, that would be nice to see. But let's go ahead and put our capos on and take off our vibrato. So I typically like to capo in two places. If you haven't seen my other demos, at the 5th fret as well as at the headstock so the strings don't pop off. And I typically will loosen the tuners 10 half turns counterclockwise. We can see here that they are doing the ground. Hopefully they're doing the ground to the thimble here, because there's no wire coming from our ground to the tremolo cavity here. And we unfortunately are going to have to remove the entire mute in order to take off our pick guard. And you can see here just how big that mute is as compared to a Jaguar mute here. And it's got the little patent pending stamp. Very, very cool. Very high quality piece here. Unfortunately, they are still using the tiny thimbles here. The same thimbles that I have griped about on all of the other Vinteras since their release. These make it difficult to install a lot of bridges. So, sadly, no shielding on the pick guard at all. No shielding in the cavities either. There is no shielding anywhere on the Bass 6, which is, again, shocking. Shocking. Shocking to see that there is no shielding anywhere on this. We do have our cloth covered leads, right? But no shielding anywhere. It is nice to see that they made the channel so that you don't actually have to line wires through tiny holes, right? But that is mega, mega disappointing. And it does appear, thankfully, that we do have a a ground going to the thimble here. But yeah, wow. Very, very disappointing to see that. It's really not making sense to me. And I'm not just trying to be a complainer here. I'm just saying, hey, this is more expensive than the Jazzmaster and the Jaguar. So why would that be omitted here? I don't get it. I really don't. That is a huge bummer. And we do have our 1 meg pots. At least we do have the high quality electronics and the cloth covered leads, but man, for the budget department at Fender, they can't give you a rare custom piece of hardware and cloth covered wiring and premium electronics and also give you shielding because they would just be losing too much money. I do not know how much the shielding paint actually cost. Maybe they're telling us secretly that the shielding paint that they've been using all along, especially because, not gonna lie, the Vintera models since Series 1 into Series 2 have been among the noisiest Fender guitars that I have ever had in the shop. Even the Vintera ones that had the conductive shielding, you know, testing even with a multimeter, for example, too, to see if there is, you know, continuity to those. I've never been able to get continuity to the quote unquote conductive shielding paint that they used on the Vintera ones anyway. So maybe they're legit telling you that it doesn't matter. But for me, if this was mine, or you bring one of these to me for service, I definitely would suggest that we shield both the pick guard as well as the cavities, especially if you live somewhere that's got a lot of like RF or electronic interference. That is not stuff you want showing up when you are performing, when you're recording, etc., etc. So yeah, again, what a bummer. All right. So now what we're going to do is we are going to set up our mute properly. And this is not too hard, but you just have to have some patience because it's a lot of kind of trial and error here. And the unfortunate thing about this design is that if you get it wrong and you're still a bit too low, everything has to come off again. So definitely you are going to need patience as you do this, especially if you have never done this before. So I'm just going to grab those two screws, and I'm going to first start by just threading them in a little bit, not all the way yet, because we are going to do this incrementally. And so you want there to be a nice click to this. But the thing that you don't want is when you have the bridge in place, you do not want this making your bridge pop up. So as you can see there, that makes our bridge pop up. That's not what we want right now. Okay, so you need to go back in and adjust that further. So I'm just going to do 2 turns at first, and it's fairly even across the board, and that's something that you definitely want. As you are adjusting the mute, that you want the height on both sides to be comparable. If you've installed it properly, it should snap and click just like that. You see that I'm not applying too much downward force to engage and disengage the mute, because once that starts to get hard, you maybe have gone a little too far. So I think that's gonna have to be it with this down. Let's just see. It's barely pushing it up now as I'm looking, like the tiniest bit. If I look with my gauge to see if the string is actually going to touch the mute, it does appear like it's gonna. So I think we're going to leave it there. All right, let's string this thing back up. We are just going to kind of dial in our string spacing here. The low E is being muted barely. So that tells me that the saddles here, in this case, are going to need to come down a bit. We're going to start off by lowering the bridge first. So you can only take this, the bridge height itself, so low. So now what we need to do is lower our saddles down instead until it is making contact with that foam. Now it's getting muted, and now I believe all the strings are being muted properly. So from here, what I need to do is just double check the radius of this bridge. So we're gonna do a quick check of the saddle radius with the over the string radius gauge, and then we are going to use the understring radius gauge to refine. It's actually not bad. My middle strings are the ones that are too low right now. So we just need to raise those. And now we are just going to triple check against our under the string gauge. Might have to drop our low E just the tiniest bit, and I think we're good now. We are going to have to remove the neck and adjust the truss rod because we've just got way too much relief right now. So back on goes our capos, and this time I'm going to loosen the strings by about 6 half turns. I'm using a little crank from Stu Mac here to aid in this a bit. And I think what we want to do here Because it was so much, I think I'm going to do a half turn. I usually only do a quarter turn, but I'm going to do a half this time because there was just way too much relief before. String spacing overall is looking good. Definitely feels more in line with what I typically like. Just feeling how straight the neck is now. So let's go ahead and tune this up. And in tuning this, the tuning is nice and tight. I am not feeling any slip on these tuners at all. We had room to spare with regards to raising the treble side of the bridge. So I'm just going to start off by going until I see it actually move and checking to see that the mute is still working. And there we go. You're getting a nice satisfying click on the mute. Indeed, all of these strings are being muted by the mute now. And again, that satisfying click, that is what you're looking for. You don't want this thing getting stuck at all. If you're having trouble with it, you have to go back until you're getting this kind of operation here. Okay, for me right now, the action after we've set it up now is definitely a lot better than where we first started. And at the 12th fret, yep, at the 12th fret, we are now right about 2 millimeters on the bass side, top of the 12th fret to the bass string, and just under 2 millimeters on the treble side here. I'd say about 1.8 or so, 1.8 millimeters. So yeah, that is within kind of the range that I typically like to set up a bass 6 for comfortable lower action. So the last thing that we're going to do now is to just stretch the strings, because we do not want this thing constantly going out of tune as we do our demo. So just like with guitars, same deal here. You're just getting underneath the string, pulling up and stretching those bad boys until they are no longer going out of tune. So we are all stretched. We can plug in now. We are plugged into the Princeton Reverb reissue now. Strangle switch is off and the volume and tone are at 100%. Bridge and middle pickup together. Now middle and neck pickup together. Now bridge and middle together with the strangle switch on. Middle plus neck pickup with the strangle switch. Now, before we proceed, I just wanted to remind myself of what the Vintera II feels like, so I can just give you guys a direct comparison. We can also just compare the tones to see if they actually did change the pickups, if these early 60s pickups are something that we can kind of distinguish against the pickups that came in the original Vintera II Bass 6. We are going to have a slight tonal difference too, because this does have the Offset Guitars UK bridge. These are nickel-plated saddles on this one. Otherwise, the rest of the hardware here, like the vibrato and stuff, is pretty much the same. Maybe we'll just do the individual pickups by themselves, without the strangle and with the strangle. Yeah, overall, I feel like maybe the Vintera 3 pickups are a little bit more articulate. These sound a little bit more boomy, not as vintagey kind of sounding, not as compressed sounding. The impressions that I am getting between the two and playing them back to back is that, firstly, definitely my initial impression on this model when I first unboxed it and the neck being thicker is confirmed once again. This definitely is a rounder overall feeling neck and definitely a slight bit thicker. The other thing is that the pickups here are definitely a different flavor of Bass 6 pickup. I feel like these have more color to them. If they are not Alnico 2s, they have been voiced in a similar way to Alnico 2 pickups. They've got a little bit more grit and kind of texture to the sound, whereas those ones are a bit more clean. I feel like these ones are actually a bit more articulate to me, with maybe a bit more mids to them, especially when we engage the strangle switch here. But without the strangle switch on these ones have a darker voicing overall to them as compared to the ones on the Vintera II, which I feel like are articulate for the most part, but also kind of have this I don't know, a more intense low end maybe coming from the Vintera II, whereas these I feel like are a bit more balanced. They sound good through the Princeton reverb. I'd say the voicing of the Vintera III pickups is much more to my taste, and again, just hits the nail on the head of that vintage, early 60s sound. Now, before we continue with the other tones, let's go ahead and try out the mute, which we labored over, right? And I've now got my bridge pickup here with the strangle switch off right now. Yeah, if you're in a Young Marble Giants cover band, this mute would be friggin' awesome for that. So in addition to muted sounding chords, you can also get the kind of tic-tacky, spaghetti western, psychobilly stuff. So it's a lot of fun. It's obviously, for some folks, it's more of a novelty than something that you are going to use a ton, but still a very, very cool feature for this Bass 6. Anyway, let's do a riff on our middle pickup without the strangle switch. Sweet. And now our neck pickup by itself. Now, I think one of the fun things that I haven't done a great job in previous Bass 6 reviews of checking out is how the Bass 6 works when you plug in some serious dirt. And I have got a new toy in the shop here. I just got this thing. I haven't really actually learned too much about it. There is a lot of stuff going on with this Shields Blender, and overall, I'm not actually super familiar with the blender. So let's go ahead and find out together what this thing does. And I found a setting that I kind of like. So let's go ahead and try this. sick. This Shields Blender is friggin' intense. And that was also showing, I had the mute up and engaged at first, turned it off in the middle, tried to give it some flavor. So now we've got the neck pickup by itself. So much frigging fun, guys. Well, my friends, that was one hell of a ride with this new Vintera III early 60s Bass 6. Undoubtedly, there is a lot to love about this instrument. And the standout features for me are the chunkier neck profile here, this fuller C shape as compared to the original Vintera II Bass 6. Comparing this against a Squier Classic vibe, if you've had your hands on one of those. The neck on that might still feel a little bigger to you, namely because that neck does have a slightly wider 1.685 inch or 42.8 millimeter nut width, while this one here has a 1.65 inch nut width. And that is basically standard across almost all Fender models these days. So this may feel more like home and more comfortable to you. As you go up this neck, though, undoubtedly, I feel like this one is a bit chunkier, especially up here at the 12th. The other standout feature here, obviously, is the inclusion of that mute. Again, it was so much fun to play with during our demo. Was getting more use out of it than I thought, especially when you start playing with dirt effects like the Shields Blender that we were messing around with today. I really had fun with that, and I am now inspired to install a mute on my other Bass 6s. With that said, unfortunately, Fender at this moment in time is not actually selling these Bass 6 mutes as aftermarket parts. Who knows if they actually are going to, but definitely keep your eyes on our friends over at Offset Guitars UK, because they are soon going to be releasing their own aftermarket Bass 6 mute. It's going to be compatible with the Vintera II or literally any Bass 6 that you own. And so definitely keep an eye out for that. And then overall, the playability of this thing is fantastic. I really like the refined kind of rolled feel of the fretboard edges here. That's very nice. And the pickups also, I've got to say that I do notice a difference between the pickups here and the pickups on the original Vintera II, and I do quite like these pickups a bit more than those. Now, unfortunately, with this Vintera III Bass 6, it isn't all positive things. The big disappointment here for me is the fact that this, the most expensive model of the Vintera III line, is missing the shielding paint in all of the cavities. I do not know if it's a fluke on just this unit that I was sent or if it's across the board. I have no idea. Definitely comment down below if you have cracked open your Vintera III Bass 6, if you bought one of these. I would love to hear that maybe some folks out there got shielding paint, because it's just a very puzzling omission. I know that the claws here are doing a lot of heavy lifting with regards to shielding out some of the unwanted noise from these pickups, but again, puzzling that they include the shielding paint on the Jaguar, but not this one. The other slightly disappointing thing on this model that we found in this deep dive was that, in fact, these single line vintage tuners are not the Goto made tuners. Instead, these are Ping made tuners. And to be honest with you, as I've been tuning through this demo and also playing this guitar, these tuners are overall holding tune just fine. The string stretching that we did went a long way in keeping the tuning stable. Obviously also calibrating the vibrato to the exact string gauge. These 24 to 100 gauge strings that came stock on this also went a long way. So all of the tuning stability stuff does not only entirely depend on your tuners, and these are perfectly serviceable as is. The last thing that I wanted to add here for you folks is after this demo was complete here, you can hear, if we're just playing this acoustically, that bridge there is a rattling mess. And I can tell, even just visually speaking, looking at them, that some of these saddles have sunk down through the course of playing in this demo. And a bottle of Loctite, my friends, some Loctite 222 purple, again, is my Loctite of choice. Put this on the little saddle height adjustment grubs, as well as the overall bridge height adjustment screws, just a little bit, one line down one side of the screw, and that is more than enough. This is not as strong as the Loctite 242 blue, but you can still kind of go overboard with this if you apply too much, so don't be ham-fisted in your application of this. But yeah, that should sort out those rattly bits. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to add that because, again, this is a loaner unit. But I will say, I do have the Offset Guitars UK bridge here, and they just came out with a new stainless steel version. And if I was to keep this Bass 6, undoubtedly, despite the fact that Loctite would would make this bridge perfectly serviceable, these Bass 6 bridges by Offset Guitars UK are frigging amazing. As you can see, the saddles are mounted from both sides to keep any lateral movement from happening on these saddles. So that is really nice. That is one of the big issues with these, aside from not actually having saddle slots, which makes the likelihood of knocking these strings out of their saddles, despite the fact that our bridge is set currently to about 6mm, 6.5mm from the base of the bridge to the pick guard, right? And that is a decent amount of break angle, as you can see there, right? But even still, if you play heavy enough, you can easily knock these strings out of these saddles, and also the inconsistency sometimes that you get if you're not using Loctite and trying to set that string where the saddle is not buzzing, makes options like these, which are readily available, again, from offsetguitarsuk.com, without the lengthy wait of some of their British competitors that are more well known. This one is every bit as good. And yeah, this would be my bridge of choice if I was to keep this Bass 6, and again, would go a long way in overall improving the feel, the sound, and stability of this Bass 6. Now, my final thoughts on this new model. Do I recommend this? If you don't already have a Bass 6, or maybe you have had a Squier Classic Vibe Bass 6 and have enjoyed using it, and are looking for a more premium version, then undoubtedly this fits that bill and exceeds it. I know that there are people in forums out there that are saying, oh, the Squier is every bit as good if you put in work, this, that, and the other thing. And that is definitely true to an extent, especially if this is really going to be more of a niche instrument in your arsenal, something that you're only going to pick up every now and again. Then for sure, the Squier fits that bill just fine. But if you want something that is, that you are going to be constantly using more like a main instrument, or is going to be featured heavily on your recordings or in your live shows, and you want something that's a bit more premium, then no doubt the Vintera III early 60s Bass 6 is exactly that. Now, if you already own a Vintera II Bass 6, this is a little bit harder for me to recommend. Especially if you ended up getting one of the Vintera II Bass 6s on sale, for example. The cloth covered wire under here is nice, definitely, but that is not enough for you to effectively lose out on whatever savings if you bought one of the Vintera II Bass 6s during the huge blowout sale that they had before they discontinued the Vintera IIs altogether. In fact, I would say that for me personally, I actually do like the slightly slimmer profile with less shoulders to the neck on the Vintera II Bass 6. It's a little bit more comfortable to me personally, but obviously that is subjective. And then also the inclusion of the mute as the selling point here, knowing that aftermarket mutes are soon going to be coming, that gives me a little bit less of an incentive to buy specifically this model over the Vintera II, which for sure I think now you will probably be able to find for a little bit cheaper, and $14.99 or $1,500 before taxes is no, that's a big chunk of change for most folks these days, right? So if you already have the Vintera II, I definitely would probably hang on to that one. And if you really want the mute, just wait until the Offset Guitars UK mute comes out, because even if Fender ultimately plans to release this mute, I do not see them doing it anytime soon, especially because this is a main feature and distinguishing selling point for this model. I think overall Fender has done a really great job with this Bass 6. It's nice that they finally gave us a bone nut. The premium cloth covered wiring underneath makes it so that you don't even have to think about replacing the wiring harness, because this is again the same exact thing that they're using. The parts here are the same as what they're using on the more expensive American vintage and also custom shop guitars. The pickups sound good. The hardware overall is solid, and some attention to detail on that bridge will make it perfectly serviceable, so long as you put in the time and the 10 or 15 bucks that it takes to get some Loctite. On top of that, I'm going to go ahead and say that this is every bit as good to me with regards to the feel and construction and the overall quality of this instrument as those more rare and hard to find Japanese Bass 6s from the 90s and the 2000s, which fetch quite a bit more money in the used market these days. And now that this and even the Vintera II have been released, I have absolutely no desire to pursue those instruments personally. So yeah, overall, kudos to Fender for making an awesome Bass 6. And also, I just got to say welcome to all of you new Bass 6 owners who picked up one of these upon their launch. And to all of you who are soon to be new Bass 6 owners who are considering buying this, these are just really, really fun instruments. The Bass 6 is just a super inspiring instrument to play. Not quite a bass, not quite a guitar, but it can do both. I don't own 4 of these now. You know, for no good reason. I have one of my Squier Bass 6s, for example, set up for a baritone tuning, which, in case you didn't already know, a lot of people are under the assumption that the Bass 6 is a baritone guitar, which it isn't. It's a short scale bass at 30 inches in scale and tuned E to E, but you can definitely, depending on the thickness of your strings and depending on the setup of your nut up here, the slotting of it specifically, you can definitely use lighter gauge strings on a Bass 6 and lean even more into that kind of baritone territory if you wanted to. So yeah, I almost feel like most people out there who are fans of offset guitars should at some point or another, especially if you already have 2, 3 Jaguars, Jazzmasters, and you just have duplicates of the same kind of guitar, that adding one of these to your arsenal is just a whole lot of fun, and definitely will push you in a different direction when it comes to the riffs that you play and write and the songs that you ultimately end up creating. Anyway, I think that's going to do it for this video, folks. I hope you found it enjoyable as well as informative, especially if you've been in the market for a premium quality Bass 6. Definitely let me know down in the comments if you ended up picking up one of these or you played one in the store, and what your thoughts about it are in comparison to the other Bass 6s from the recent past, such as the Vintera II Bass 6 and also the Squire Classic Vibe Bass 6. You all sharing your personal experiences is very, very helpful for those who are thinking about it. So definitely do take the time to share those down below. I'd like to take this opportunity again to thank our friends at Zounds, and in particular Billy, for getting all of these Vintera III offset guitars to me on loan for review. I love shopping at Zounds and have been a loyal customer of theirs for well over a decade now. And on top of their amazing customer service, I just love the fact that you can get the gear that you want and need now and easily split them up into 4, 6, or even 12 monthly installments, always interest-free. The application process is a breeze. There's no background check. There's no credit check. They don't even need your social security number. So I highly encourage you, if you are thinking about picking up one of these Bass 6s, to click on the affiliate links that I've left down below. It helps out the channel a ton. And so thank you in advance for any of you that do decide to do that. As always, if you haven't already, please hit that like and subscribe button, as well as the notification bell, to be notified of new videos as soon as they drop. And don't forget to follow Totally Wired Guitars for more offset guitars buying tips.